The bitter wind cut like a knife. The snow piled higher with each passing hour. In the merciless wilderness, a man's survival often hung by a thread, or more precisely, by the furs on his back. When temperatures plunged below freezing, when blizzards raged for days, when every breath froze in the air, the right pelts meant the difference between life and death. These 7 furs weren't just valuable, they were life insurance on the frontier. Some provided unmatched warmth against killing cold. Others repelled water that could lead to fatal hypothermia. A few were so precious, they could be traded for the supplies a man needed to see another season. For the mountain men who ventured where few dared, knowing which pelts to trap, how to prepare them, and when to use them, wasn't just knowledge, it was survival itself. My name is Sam, and this is Wild America. Now, let's break down the 7 fur pelts that meant the difference between life and death on the frontier. Number 1, beaver. First and foremost, a frontiersman without beaver pelts was as good as broke, and often as good as dead. The beaver's double-layered fur was unlike anything else in the wilderness. Beneath the coarse guard hairs lay a dense, barbed underfur that, when processed, created the finest felt known to man. A beaver's fur consists of 2 kinds of hair, coarse outer, or guard hair, and downy soft underhair. Through a microscope, the underhair appears as slender strands studded with tiny barbs. This barbed characteristic results in superior felt. In an era when most occupations were outdoors and required sturdy headgear, high-quality felt was essential. For centuries, beaver felt was the primary material used in the construction of hats. The demand was insatiable. In Europe, a beaver hat wasn't just clothing. It was status, fashion, and necessity all in one. And that demand drove men deep into the unexplored wilderness, risking everything for the thick, water-resistant pelts. But beaver wasn't just valuable for trade. For the mountain men themselves, beaver fur provided unmatched insulation. A beaver-lined coat could mean survival in the brutal mountain winters where temperatures plunged far below zero. Warren Ferris, a trapper in the 1830s, wrote, "Many a life has been saved by the warmth of beaver when all else failed against the mountain cold." The pelts were processed with meticulous care. Trappers would stretch the skins on willow frames to dry, then bundle them into packs of 100 pounds, roughly 50 to 60 pelts. These packs became the standard unit of the fur trade, worth a small fortune back in St. Louis. The trapping itself was an art form that could determine a man's survival. Steel traps were set underwater at precise depths along beaver slides, the paths these animals used to enter the water. The trap was secured to a drowning pole that pulled the caught beaver into deeper water, ensuring a quick death and preventing damage to the valuable pelt. Beaver pelts came in 2 distinct qualities. Coat beaver, or castor grass, had already been worn by Native Americans, with the guard hairs rubbed off and the undercoat broken in. These were particularly prized because the wearing process had already begun to separate the valuable underfur. Parchment beaver, or castor sec, were fresh, untreated pelts that required more processing, but were still highly valuable. The Hudson's Bay Company, which dominated the northern fur trade for centuries, established the made beaver as the standard unit of exchange, equivalent to 1 prime adult male beaver pelt. Everything from guns to blankets was priced in made beaver units, showing just how central this fur was to frontier economics. Indeed, beaver was king, but it wasn't the only fur that kept men alive in the merciless wild. Number 2, buffalo. If beaver was wealth, buffalo was pure survival. No other hide combined the sheer size and insulating properties of the American bison. A single buffalo robe could cover an entire bed, wrap a man completely, or serve as an emergency shelter in the harshest conditions. The thickness of a winter buffalo hide was remarkable, up to 1 inch thick at the hump, with dense fur that could repel wind, snow, and even light rain. For a man caught in a prairie blizzard, a buffalo robe was often the only thing standing between him and freezing to death. Mountain men learned from native tribes that buffalo robes required specific preparation. Unlike other hides, buffalo was rarely tanned into soft leather. Instead, the hide was scraped of flesh, the hair left intact, and the skin dried and smoked to preserve it. The resulting robe was heavy, sometimes weighing 10 to 15 pounds, but the weight was a small price to pay for its unmatched warmth. Jim Bridger, legendary mountain man, reportedly survived 3 days in a February blizzard by wrapping himself in a buffalo robe and burrowing into a snowdrift, emerging hungry but alive when lesser men would have perished. Buffalo robes became so valuable that by the 1830s, the American Fur Company was shipping tens of thousands east each year. For frontiersmen, they were too bulky to carry on long trapping expeditions, but at winter camps and trading posts, buffalo robes were essential equipment. The timing of the buffalo hunt was critical for obtaining the best robes. Winter pelts, taken between November and February, were prime, with thick, full coats that provided maximum insulation. Summer hides were nearly worthless for warmth, as the buffalo shed their heavy coats in the warmer months. Native American women were masters at preparing these massive hides. After scraping away all flesh and fat with specialized bone or stone tools, they would soften the hide by working a mixture of buffalo brain, liver, and fat into the skin. This natural tanning solution contained oils and enzymes that broke down the hide's stiff fibers. The final step involved smoking the hide over a slow, smoky fire of punky wood, which helped waterproof the robe and gave it a distinctive amber color. For winter travel, especially on the open plains, buffalo robes were often modified with leather ties that allowed a man to secure the robe around himself while riding or walking. Some mountain men sewed several robes together to create sleeping bags that could withstand the most brutal conditions. As one trapper put it, a man might survive without his rifle, but never without his buffalo robe when winter sets in. But while buffalo provided the heaviest protection, it wasn't always practical for daily wear and movement. Number 3. Deer. If there was one hide that frontiersmen relied on more than any other for clothing, it was deerskin. Unlike the heavy buffalo or the trade-focused beaver, deerskin offered the perfect combination of durability, flexibility, and protection for men who needed to move through the wilderness with ease. Deerskin breathed in summer heat, yet provided decent insulation in cooler weather. When properly brain-tanned, a technique mountain men learned from Native Americans, it became soft as cloth, but remained far more durable. A good buckskin shirt could last for years of hard use, shedding light rain, blocking wind, and protecting against brush and thorns that would tear cloth garments to shreds. Osborne Russell, a trapper who kept a detailed journal of his time in the Rockies, wrote, "Our buckskin clothing, although not very elegant, was durable and comfortable and well adapted to our mode of life." The versatility of deerskin made it invaluable. From it, a skilled hand could craft moccasins, leggings, shirts, gloves, bags, and even crude but effective shelters. When other materials wore out, deerskin was often what remained. Perhaps most importantly, deerskin could be acquired almost anywhere in the frontier. While beaver might be scarce in some regions and buffalo absent in others, deer were ubiquitous across North America. The brain tanning process was a skill that separated experienced mountain men from greenhorns. The basic principle was simple, but the execution required practice. Every animal has enough brains to tan its own hide, a saying that proved remarkably accurate. The brains contained natural emulsifiers and oils that broke down the hide's stiff fibers. After scraping the hide clean of flesh and hair, if making leather rather than fur, the brains were mashed into a paste with warm water and worked into the skin. The hide was then stretched, worked, and smoked to create the final product. A well-tanned buckskin could be washed repeatedly without stiffening, a crucial quality for clothing that might see months of continuous wear. Different regions produced different qualities of deerskin. Mountain men prized the thick hides of northern mule deer for winter wear, while the thinner skins of white-tailed deer from eastern forests made excellent summer clothing and storage bags. The natural color of brain-tanned buckskin was a pale yellow-white, but frontiersmen often smoked their clothing heavily, which darkened it to amber or light brown. This smoking process wasn't just for appearance, it helped repel insects and made the leather more water-resistant. For many frontiersmen, the practical value of deerskin outweighed even its trade value. A man dressed in well-made buckskins could move silently through forests, stay relatively dry in light rain and avoid the crippling chafing that cotton or wool caused on long journeys. As essential as deerskin was, there were specialized furs that served crucial purposes in the harshest environments. Number 4. Wolverine. The rarest and perhaps most specialized fur on our list belonged to the wolverine, an animal as fierce and resilient as the wilderness itself. What made wolverine fur extraordinary wasn't its beauty or even its warmth, though it excelled at both. It was its unique property of resisting frost buildup, a quality that could save fingers, toes, and lives in the brutal northern winters. When breath freezes on most furs, it forms ice crystals that eventually melt from body heat, soaking the fur and dramatically reducing its insulating properties. But wolverine fur somehow resists this frost accumulation, staying dry and warm even in the most extreme conditions. Native peoples of the far north had known this for centuries, which is why wolverine fur was prized for parka ruffs, the trim around the hood. Mountain men quickly adopted this wisdom, using wolverine whenever they could acquire it for the trim on mittens, hoods, and boot linings. John Coulter, who survived a famous naked flight from Blackfoot warriors, later claimed that the wolverine-lined moccasins he eventually obtained saved what remained of my frost-bitten feet when nothing else would have. The problem with wolverine was its scarcity. The animals were solitary, fierce, and ranged across enormous territories. A trapper might go years without seeing one, let alone catching it. This made wolverine pelts extremely valuable, worth several beaver pelts in trade. Modern science has finally explained what native peoples and mountain men knew through experience. Wolverine fur has unique microscopic properties. The guard hairs are not only water repellent, but have a special structure that prevents the formation of hoarfrost from frozen breath. Additionally, the fur fibers don't readily conduct heat, which means they don't melt snow or ice that lands on them. Instead, the frozen particles can be easily brushed away. The most valuable part of the wolverine was the long guard hairs from the animal's back and rump. These were often cut from the pelt and used specifically for trim on hoods, where they would form a protective tunnel around the face. When properly arranged, these guard hairs would direct a person's breath away from their face and chest, preventing the deadly cycle of freezing and thawing that could lead to hypothermia. Wolverine fur also had remarkable durability. While other furs might wear out after a season or two of hard use, wolverine trim could last for many years. This longevity made the high cost more bearable for those who could afford it. For those who ventured into the highest mountains or northernmost territories, however, wolverine wasn't a luxury. It was a necessity that no other fur could replace. As one Hudson's Bay Company factor wrote in 1821, "A man may survive many mistakes in the wild, but choosing poor fur in northern winter is often his last." While wolverine served a specialized purpose, other furs offered different advantages. Number 5. Otter. River otter pelts combined beauty with remarkable functionality, making them both valuable for trade and essential for certain aspects of frontier survival. The otter's fur is extraordinarily dense, containing up to 1 million hairs per square inch, creating a nearly waterproof barrier that kept trappers dry in wet conditions. This density also made otter one of the most durable furs, outlasting many others through years of hard use. Mountain men prized otter for items that needed to repel water while maintaining warmth. Mittens, caps, and collar linings made from otter could mean the difference between comfort and hypothermia when working around water in cold weather. The fur's natural oils repelled water so effectively that some trappers used otter skin pouches to keep their precious gunpowder dry during river crossings, a use that literally saved lives when a dry powder charge meant survival. Louis Garrard, who chronicled his time with mountain men in the 1840s, described watching a trapper carefully wrap his fire-starting kit in a small otter skin pouch before a dangerous river crossing. That little packet, kept dry by the otter skin, meant he would have fire that night, while others might shiver until dawn. Otter was also among the most beautiful furs, with a rich brown color and natural luster that made it valuable in eastern markets. A skilled trapper with a few prime otter pelts could trade them for enough supplies to last months in the wilderness. The preparation of otter pelts required special care. Unlike beaver, which could be stretched on a hoop or board, otter was typically skinned, cased, pulled off the carcass like removing a sock with the fur side in. This preserved the natural oils in the fur and prevented damage to the guard hairs. The pelt was then turned fur side out and stretched on a specialized board that maintained the otter's natural elongated shape. River otters were most commonly trapped along waterways using the same steel traps used for beaver, but set on the banks at slides, the smooth paths otters created to enter the water. The best pelts came from otters caught in midwinter, when their fur was at its thickest and most lustrous. In the hierarchy of the fur trade, otter ranked just below beaver in overall importance, but often commanded a higher price per pelt. The American Fur Company's records from the 1830s show that prime otter pelts were valued at roughly 1.5 times the price of prime beaver. For mountain men operating in the Pacific Northwest, sea otter provided an even more valuable prize. Though rarely used for personal gear due to its extreme value, sea otter fur was so prized in Asian markets that a single prime pelt could be worth the equivalent of a year's wages. The maritime fur trade centered on sea otter became one of the driving forces of exploration along the Pacific coast. While not as common as beaver in the fur trade, otter represented a premium product that wise mountain men collected whenever opportunity allowed, both for trade and personal use in critical gear. But for sheer luxury combined with practical warmth, few furs could match our next entry. Number 6. Fox. Fox fur, particularly red, silver, and cross fox varieties, offered a combination of lightweight warmth and striking beauty that made it valuable both for survival and trade. Unlike the heavier buffalo or beaver, fox fur was remarkably light for the warmth it provided. This made it ideal for items where weight mattered, but insulation couldn't be compromised, like mittens, ear coverings, and trim on hoods. The hollow guard hairs of fox fur trapped air exceptionally well, creating superior insulation without bulk. For a frontiersman traveling light through cold territory, fox fur linings could provide critical warmth without the encumbrance of heavier pelts. Mountain men learned from native peoples that fox fur was particularly effective when used as trim around facial openings in hoods and collars. The long guard hairs would frost up instead of the wearer's beard or breath freezing, creating a protective barrier against biting winds. Jedediah Smith, one of the most accomplished mountain men, was known to wear a fox fur-lined cap that he claimed kept my thoughts from freezing solid during his winter explorations of the South Pass. Of all the fox varieties, silver fox commanded the highest prices. A genetic variant of the red fox with black fur tipped with white, silver foxes were relatively rare, occurring naturally in perhaps 1 of every 10 red foxes. A prime silver fox pelt could fetch 10 times the price of a standard red fox in eastern markets. Cross foxes, named for the dark cross-shaped pattern on their shoulders, were intermediate in value and more commonly encountered than silver foxes. Their distinctive markings made them popular for decorative uses on clothing. The trapping of foxes required different techniques than those used for aquatic mammals, like beaver and otter. Fox sets were typically made on land using smaller traps carefully concealed with local materials and baited with meat or scent lures. The most successful trappers learned to think like their quarry, placing sets along game trails, near den sites, or at the edges of meadows where foxes hunted for mice and voles. Proper handling of fox pelts was critical to maintaining their value. Unlike beaver, fox pelts were always skinned cased, tube-like, rather than open, flat. After careful fleshing to remove all fat and meat, the pelts were stretched on specialized wooden forms that maintained their natural proportions. Any damage to the guard hairs could significantly reduce a pelt's value, so experienced trappers handled fox with exceptional care. Beyond its practical applications, fox, especially silver fox, was among the most valuable furs by weight in the eastern markets. A few prime silver fox pelts could be traded for enough supplies to outfit an entire season's expedition. This dual value, practical survival utility combined with high trade worth, made fox pelts a priority target for trappers who understood that in the wilderness, versatility often meant survival. Yet for pure luxury and the highest value per square inch, one fur stood above the rest. Number 7. Mink. The smallest fur on our list might seem an unlikely candidate for survival gear, but mink pelts played a crucial role both in trade economics and specialized frontier applications. Mink fur possesses an almost unmatched combination of density, softness, and durability. The short, incredibly thick underfur creates exceptional warmth for its weight, while the glossy guard hairs shed water effectively. For items requiring dexterity combined with warmth, like glove linings or face mask edges, nothing surpassed mink. The thin skin and supple nature of properly prepared mink allowed for movement while still providing critical insulation. Mountain men recognized that for certain specialized uses, an ounce of mink was worth a pound of coarser furs. Small mink-lined pouches protected watches, compasses, and other precision instruments from the damaging effects of extreme temperature changes. Perhaps most importantly, mink represented concentrated value. A handful of prime mink pelts could be traded for critical supplies when larger, bulkier furs might be impractical to transport. In an emergency, a mountain man might travel light with just a few high-value mink pelts to trade for what he needed at the nearest outpost. As James Kleiman noted in his journals, "When travel must be fast and light, a wise man carries mink. 3 good pelts will buy what 20 beaver might and weigh less than a day's rations." Mink were typically found near water, but unlike beaver and otter, they spent significant time on land. This meant trappers needed to understand both aquatic and terrestrial habits to successfully harvest these valuable animals. The best sets were placed at the interface between land and water, on logs crossing streams, at the entrances to bank dens, or along narrow shorelines where mink traveled regularly. The quality of mink pelts varied dramatically by region and season. Northern mink, particularly those from the Great Lakes and upper Mississippi regions, produced the darkest, most valuable fur. Prime winter pelts taken between December and February commanded the highest prices, while early fall or spring mink were significantly less valuable. Preparing mink pelts required exceptional skill. The thin, delicate skins could easily be damaged during skinning and fleshing. After careful removal from the carcass, the pelts were turned fur-side in and stretched on specialized mink boards, tapered wooden forms that stretched the skin to its optimal shape without tearing. After drying, the pelts were carefully removed from the boards, turned fur-side out, and gently brushed to restore the natural luster of the guard hairs. In the Eastern fashion markets, mink was prized for its rich color, durability, and luxurious feel. A coat made from matched mink pelts represented the height of luxury, affordable only to the wealthiest citizens. This consistent demand ensured that mink pelts retained their value even when other fur markets fluctuated. For frontiersmen operating far from established trade routes, this concentration of value in a lightweight, durable package made mink an essential part of their survival strategy. The wilderness showed no mercy to those who chose poorly. Each of these 7 furs served critical roles in the complex calculus of frontier survival. From the practical everyday buckskin to the specialized Wolverine, from the trade-driving beaver to the life-saving buffalo robe. The mountain men who mastered the knowledge of these pelts, their properties, their preparation, and their proper uses gained a crucial edge in a world where the margin between life and death was often as thin as a single layer of fur. The seasonal nature of the fur trade shaped the entire rhythm of frontier life. Winter trapping yielded the prime pelts that brought the highest prices. Spring meant traveling to rendezvous points where pelts could be traded for supplies. Summer was for exploration and establishing new trap lines. Fall meant preparing for the coming trapping season and securing winter quarters. This annual cycle created a unique culture among the mountain men, one that valued self-reliance, practical knowledge, and the ability to read the natural world. The skills needed to identify, harvest, and prepare these 7 critical furs formed the foundation of frontier survival knowledge. Today, we've lost much of this intimate knowledge of natural materials. Our synthetic fabrics and climate-controlled environments have separated us from the wisdom that kept generations of frontiersmen alive in conditions we can barely imagine. But the legacy of these 7 furs lives on in the stories, journals, and surviving artifacts of the mountain men, a testament to human ingenuity and adaptation in one of the most challenging environments ever faced. And speaking of survival knowledge, don't forget to check out our previous episode on the essential tools that frontiersmen carried, available now on our channel. This is Sam, and you've been watching Wild America. Until next time, stay wild.